Hello, hello. What's going on there, folks? Welcome back here to a Tuesday night. It is about 11:46 p.m. here, California time, July 30th, 2024. The last day of July tomorrow. Then we begin August. Hopefully, fall will come upon us very quickly because I'm tired of this heat out here. Latest activity shows a 4.1 down along the Middle America Trench there, somewhat deep, 171 kilometers there on the globe. Also 1.1 into Nevada. That's going to be this little earthquake up here outside of Las Vegas. Looks like Los Angeles area is seeing a little earthquake out here as well along the Malibu coast fault with a 2.4 here in the last 25 minutes or so. We'll get to space weather activity here in just a little bit as far as the Aurora activity. Looking at the extreme portion here of Southern California. That includes the San Andreas Fault here. Relatively quiet here along the plate boundary. We do have 1, 2, 3 earthquakes here. Literally just equal sides here along the plate boundary on the North American side of the plate boundary in the last 24 hours. Nothing big going on. Mostly smaller microquake activity up and down the board. We do have a 2.7 there from late last night. This earthquake about ready to drop off the globe there on the northern end of the San Jacinto Fault Zone. So typical activity. There's always going to be earthquake activity out here on any given day there in the California area. Ridgecrest area, a couple smaller quakes up there as well as we work our way northward. The Bay Area fairly quiet. Only a handful of smaller quakes out there across the area. A couple smaller quakes up here north of Lake Tahoe. Remember in the last couple of weeks we did see a pretty decent swarm of activity here underneath Lake Tahoe. That has just disappeared completely with nothing to come of it. Clear Lake volcanic field there, seeing some typical activity. Northern California, a couple smaller earthquakes here into the Cascadia subduction zone. This is a very shallow earthquake here at the Cascadia area. This is definitely a surface quake, 1.0 at negative depth. And further down south here outside of Eureka, a couple earthquakes down there into the subduction zone as well. So I have switched this over to miles from kilometers. Occasionally you may hear me pull up the kilometers here, but a lot of people here asking, why don't we switch it over to miles from kilometers? Just because of the usage, right? I've always been using kilometers and units and stuff like that are science-based. There's not going to go into it, but we'll switch over here to miles. So we got about 10 miles deep there into the Cascadia subduction zone for a couple smaller earthquakes. Now, there is a little bit of tremor. Let me pull up the tremor map here tonight. This is going to be the tremor activity. Northern California and Oregon here seeing about 213 epicenters of tremor. That is occurring down into the southern end here of the Cascadia. So that's why we're seeing a little bit of elevated earthquake activity upstream here towards the locked area of the Cascadia subduction zone. Nothing big, but still, any type of earthquake activity is just a sign there that we're continuing to build some steam out there across that major subduction zone. A couple smaller earthquakes out there around the Mount St. Helens area as well. No major swarming going on here. Further out and about across the states here. Yellowstone, nothing going on across that super volcano. And these are the recorded seismograph stations. They're showing wind events from earlier this afternoon, dying off early evening time period. As you can see there on the dark blue lines there on the seismograph stations, these are the digital seismograph stations there showing the wind that often gets quite amplified out there across northwest Wyoming. No earthquake activity to report, though. Texas area still seeing some movement out there across the oil fields as normal. Crazy to think, right? Earthquake country out in Texas. A little earthquake out in New Jersey. This 2.2 out here. Let's see here. 2.9 miles deep. This looks like that area that's seen some activity a couple months back. So a little bit of earthquake activity here, amplifying out here across the eastern portion of the country. Puerto Rico Trench got a handful of earthquakes out here as well, with the latest of 3.3. Now, if you look up here, way north here, north of the Arctic Circle, we got an earthquake out in the Greenland area, 5.1. We normally don't see too much earthquake activity out there. That's quite rare, actually, to see an earthquake of that magnitude, specifically in that area. So if you look at the historical data here, most of the earthquakes are going to occur along the major rift zone out here that extends from further north there of the Greenland Sea through Iceland, through the Great Atlantic Rift boundary there. But inland, we don't really see too much earthquake activity out here. So a little rare to see that earthquake. 5.1 in the Greenland area. Further down south, as I mentioned, not a whole lot there across the Atlantic Rift Zone, but down in the South Sandwich Trench here, we got things ramping up a little bit. Couple 4s and some even the 5-pointer, 5.3 here occurring within the northern edge here of the subduction zone. Now, I know we've seen a handful of earthquakes out here over the last 30 days, bouncing back and forth here between this well-defined subduction zone area. One earthquake out here in the East Pacific rise. This is a divergent zone, separation here of the seafloor across the ocean there in the Eastern Pacific. This activity is situated right there across the Pacific plate here in the yellow and the Nazca plate in the light blue. Separation here of the seafloor increases pressure out here across the South America area. So watch the Peru-Chile Trench up here. Nothing big going on there for now, but got a handful of smaller quakes out there in the last 24 hours. Further north up here across the Aleutian Trench, a couple smaller quakes, including a 4 or so up here at the extreme northern end. Got some typical activity out here, really nothing of any major movement. 3.8 as well. The plates, one thing everyone has to understand here is that these plates are almost always showing some earthquake activity out here. It's when it gets super duper quiet in certain areas that we have to watch for some bigger quake potential. Like this area here across the Solomon Islands, it still hasn't filled in. Look at that. There's a lack of activity here that's a little concerning. We go to the last 30 days and, you know, we can see all the earthquake activity here across the plate boundary west of Solomon Islands and south along the plate boundary. But this specific area here is a little concerning. It's just nothing. Zip zero. And that's not normal. So we'll continue to keep an eye here on the Solomon Islands area. No doubt this region can see some large earthquakes. I do want to double check the when is the last time we've seen some activity out there. I'm going to go back here the last 24 years or so. Wow, crazy to think the year 2000 was 24 years ago. Wow, crazy. Specifically in this area of the Solomon Islands region, just in this little area right here. I don't want to cover too much over there around the Santa Cruz Islands area, but just specifically where we're lacking that movement. So the last earthquake, it looks like last year, a 6-pointer, 6.1 of any sizable events. And as far as large magnitudes go, it can get up a little higher up here. There was an 8.1 here just around the Solomon Islands area back in 2007. 7.8 back in 2016, a little bit further down south here. Another 7.6 back in 2014. 7.4 back in 2014 as well. A couple earthquakes back there in that range. So we're, potentially could be something brewing out here. We could be overdue for some larger quake activity around the Solomon Islands area. Like I said, there hasn't been a whole lot of activity there in the last month. All right, let's see what else we got out here, folks, across the globe real quick. A couple smaller earthquakes down there across the New Zealand area. Looks like there's a 4.0 Kermadec Trench area right there on the map around the globe. Nothing major that I can see for now. Hawaii, Let's go out here and see what's going on out there in the beautiful state of Hawaii, out in the Central Pacific. Couple of smaller earthquakes out there. Really nothing of any major interest right now. But let's double check things here from the volcano hazard site. And the volcano's still yellow and advisory. How long is it going to take here before we see some type of an eruption event out here? There's obviously still earthquake activity and still issues going on with clicking on these little links. Let me zoom in here a little bit. I don't know why it does that. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. It's weird. So here's the past 12 hours. There's a little bit more earthquake activity showing up here on the graphs. Got to remember, every single one of these spikes here, there's probably, there's still probably a good 100 earthquakes occurring within the vicinity of that seismograph station there in this area of the craters area. I don't know why they don't include every single earthquake. They just don't. But there's quite a bit of earthquake activity still. Not quite as much as, the larger events go. But we're still seeing quite a bit of earthquake activity here across the area of the upper East Rift Zone. Deformation data out here across the summit area still shows continued inflation, or I should say reinflation, following that large displacement of magma from the summit off to the upper East Rift Zone recently. But we're recharging the area, so we're at a little standstill. But I think things will get going here soon enough. Clustering going on across Taiwan southward, Indian Ocean out here across this divergent boundary. Got a decent earthquake, a 5-pointer, fairly recent. Not showing up here on the USGS map. So this earthquake looks like it just came in here, well, a couple hours ago. Showing up here on the globe. Nothing on the USGS map, though. Mediterranean areas, fairly typical out here. And, wow, that was just a little close there. As far as any subsequent activity following that 5.1 up here in Iceland, or Greenland, got a little bit of movement up here, specifically along this plate boundary. Now, there's definitely something going on up here across this area that it could include eventually Iceland, where we're seeing a couple 2s and 3s out there stirring up down south. So let's see what's happening there across the Iceland area. Got a little decent swarm occurring here southwest of Grindavik. This is what I'm talking about here, folks. Keep an eye on the earthquake activity, right? We normally see things really kick up here across the rift boundaries prior to any increasing further push of magma and recharging of the area below here across the Svartsengi area. So we got a decent amount of earthquake activity here just southwest of the region of interest along the plate boundary rift zone. So got to watch that. I think we'll see things kick up here within the next week or so across Grindavik and the Svartsengi area. We're at a fairly elevated level. Let me show you guys these graphs real quick here across the area of Iceland. Grindavik right here. These are the 8-hour run times. This in the red is the vertical displacement indicating inflation. Here is the last eruption back in May. Obviously, where we were inflated, we dropped due to the volume of magma and the lava output. Now we're coming back up. Took us a little bit, but we're above the previous level seen just prior to the last eruption. So things are getting active. We'll continue to keep an eye on that closely. All right, space weather activity. Wow, looks like we got what's kicking up right now. Another M flare coming in. A little bit of radio blackout being observed right over India. From right now it's M5.9, but let's see what we got there. This looks like a little bit stronger, almost a near X flare once again. M7.7 is the event coming in there. Cracking. We are cracking with some M flares here recently. This activity is coming off of, well, I'm not for sure exactly what's going on with this image here, but we lost it. far as the flare features go, so it's kind of hard to decipher exactly where this activity is occurring from here. Let's see, that was at 0523. Hard to say. Normally on this image here, we can't really see exactly where the flares are coming from. It could be this area down here on the western limb, but it's hard to say with this blackout being observed right now. I'm not for sure what's going on with this, but it looks like it's offline for some reason. So we do have some M flares coming in, obviously with the radio blackout, the global D-layer absorption map here, showing that radio blackout. But yeah, things are kicking up. We got numerous sunspots out here. If you look at the complexity of all these sunspots, there's a lot of intermingling going on here within the polarity of all of these fields out here. So numerous sunspots, including up here. There is an active region down on the southeastern limb of the sun, and a little bit further up north here that shows some complexity as well. So we are continuing our active days here ahead for some further flaring potential, and of course that means some increasing aurora threats. But I have to say here, I'm going to say it, all right? I don't know how many other folks have said it, but this last event, pretty much a fluke, a dud. Now I know there were some reports, obviously, quite a few folks seen some auroras there across the northern tier states, and then maybe even down in Nebraska and whatnot with their phones, amplifying the exposure time. But this was not no big event. The G3 storm that they had forecasted never materialized. It never reached G3 storming. If anything, it reached a very weak KP index of 5, a G1 class storm. So these these models out here that forecast the space weather activities, just similar to the weather models here on Earth. You don't accurately know 100% what's being shot off, from a large CME. It was Earth directed, but I think it missed us. Either went north or south of us. That's the way I see it on the Earth-Sun plane. And the forecast here calls for a little unsettled conditions across the next couple nights. But as you can see, KP index low. Aurora is pretty much non-existent out there across the area for tonight. So I call that a fluke. If you're calling a G3 class storm and we only get barely a G1, yeah, that's way under. Way under. Sliver of a moon out there, 16% there. And there's our 25% chance for the X-flare probability. That's a decent chance, though. I mean, we got just looking at the complexity here tells me that there's definitely a chance of seeing some X-flare probability. All right, hurricane activity. I know we got some hurricane activity out here in the Eastern Pacific. 90% chance of a cyclone formation in the next 48 hours. So we're talking about, well, this disturbance here, disturbance 1. Look at that cluster of thunderstorms starting to get a little swirl to it. Some organization going on there within that area off the coast of Mexico. So let's go check out what's going on here with the numerical model. We'll check out a different region here. We can go to the Pacific out here, North Pacific states over here, Mexico off in this area of interest. You're going to see it form out there off the coast of Mexico as I put this into motion right there. Watch this area. It's going to be buttoned up against this high pressure ridge, so I don't think it's going to last long. It's going to keep it south or squashed. Not going to reach Hawaii Islands. It dissipates before the Hawaii Islands, which is right about here. There's another cyclone formation behind that shows a little bit more northward movement. It wants to bump into the high pressure completely. But high means high and dry. Squashing that low pressure like a bug. And there's really no threats of these tropical systems here that I can see as far as the weather forecast goes. Let's go check out the Atlantic Ocean, see what's going on out here. We got a little Yeah, 60% chance here in the next 7 days for some tropical development. So let's go take a look here. Let's check out a different region. We're going to go to, let's see here, North Atlantic. That'll work. Go back here to today's date. Massive Atlantic high pressure out here. Look at that. Goodness. I do not like high pressure. So we'll watch here and see what develops out here in the Atlantic. There's our system out there off the coast of Mexico that's going to dissipate. There's something brewing up here. It looks like in the Gulf of Mexico area. Southern states here look like they may get some type of tropical development that's forming up out of the blue. We'll have to watch that. That just kind of kicks up right out of the blue, and then something to watch there. It looks like a decent hurricane, rapid development. But far as any long-tracked hurricane situations out here goes, there's not a whole lot. We got a lot of Sahara dust out here from the desert, and that could be inhibiting some of the activity out there in the Atlantic, but we'll continue to check back on that as things develop and progress here. All right, seismograph stations. Yeah, the PB stations here are offline. They've been offline for a couple days. So I'm going to get those tomorrow. I'll just have to do a reboot. I may just do a reboot of the stream just to do some updates and whatnot. We'll see what happens. But we'll catch you guys back out here tomorrow, Wednesday, halfway through the work week. Pretty easy. Couple more days, and then Friday is right upon us once again here. So have a good night, folks. Stay safe out there, and of course, be prepared. Make sure you guys have an earthquake plan, and we'll see you guys back here tomorrow morning. Stay safe.